Awesome. NJJA podcast, episode 4. NJJA, folks, I think we've made it. We have 2 Nebraska senators on the podcast today. Super excited. We got Senator Pansing Brooks and Senator Tony Vargas. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. We feel like we made it.
Yeah, we did. We made it because we're here on the podcast.
Senator Vargas just made it.
Yeah, literally just walked in the door.
Before we get too far into things, I have to remind everybody, NJJA conference coming up. Well, I guess it's not coming up, but it will sneak up on us. May 6th through the 8th at the Eunice Conference Center in Kearney. I know Senator Pansing Brooks has been there. Senator Vargas, we got to get you out there this year.
That's awesome.
Sponsors, vendors, if you're interested, please check out the website, njja.org. They're starting to come in, but we can always use more. So I know we've got some speakers lined up, correct, Tom?
You bet.
Awesome.
We got Karen Vedino, who is a humorist, but also has a message about vicarious trauma. We got Adam Foss coming in on Thursday that has talked about prosecutorial issues with youth, and then we're going to end up with John Cruel and Marty Harp from the
Carrie Harp. Get Carrie Harp. Yep.
From the Robert F. Kennedy Juvenile Justice Center.
Wow.
Then the breakout system. I mean, if you look at the breakouts, awesome venue this year again.
So for those of you who don't know, that is the man behind the mic is Mr. Tom McBride over there. He serves as the executive director of NJJA. So I am super excited to finally get him on the microphone as well. He's been fighting us on it. So, but he's here. Okay. Let's get to it. Again, we're super excited to have you guys here. Thank you so much for agreeing to come spend some time with us. So, Senator Pansing Brooks, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why is being a state senator so important to you?
Well, I represent the district where the Capitol stands. It's District 28. And I feel so fortunate to be where I am. I feel like it's the right place at the right time for me. When I got out of law school, I think a lot of people expected women to go into juvenile and family law, and I decided at that point, well, to heck with that. I'm not feeling going to fall into somebody's expectations from me. I'm going to do something else. So my husband and I started a law firm and did mostly corporate and business and real estate law. He now does a lot of telecom work. But then we fast forward through lots of community activism and fundraising and raising 3 children and, dealing with the schools and PTO chair at all 3 schools twice for each of the kids. So, and then all of a sudden I got in the legislature, and I think it's probably one of the first couple weeks, and all of a sudden somebody came to me about juveniles, and somebody said, do you realize that juveniles don't have access to counsel across the state? And I said, what? That's basically con law 101 from law school. And so I started researching and recognizing that I feel I've done a disservice to Nebraska's children by not going into juvenile law and advocating for them during my career. So I feel very compelled to do this work right now for juveniles. The fact that kids of color are overrepresented and kids with special needs are overrepresented in the system. And I just feel like I'm at the right place at the right time. I really care about these kids, and I'm going to do everything I can for the next couple of years. I have 3 more years left in the legislature, and I just feel fortunate to be here and be able to be active with fabulous people like my friend Senator Vargas, and his wife is an amazing advocate of her own right and has really worked for kids throughout her career as well.
And you born and raised in Lincoln, is that correct?
I'm among 5 generations to be in my district of all things. That's a lot. Wow.
Southeast Knight, correct?
I am. Go Southeast, yeah.
I did a little bit of research and was looking through the Wikipedia page there, and and it was quite impressive, I must say.
Well,
So
thank you.
congratulations
One of the
for everything.
things that we also wanted to do was have you pass along our birthday wishes to your mother.
Yes.
Oh,
With her
thank
100th
you.
birthday
100th
today.
birthday. It was actually yesterday. And
Yesterday?
so
That's
she would have been
awesome.
100, and she was very inspiring to me. So thank you.
She'd be proud.
She was on the school board, so she also cared about kids in Lincoln. So
Senator Vargas, Senator Tony Vargas.
Hey, I'm not a Southeast Knight, just so you know.
Graduated
sorry.
somewhere up in Rochester, correct?
Born and raised in New York. I am born in Flushing, Queens, and was raised in all over New York State, New York City, Long Island, New York. I went to college in upstate New York, and found my way to New York City right after college, and I was a teacher. Although my one thing that's always important that I share about one of the reasons I got into public office is my parents are both born and raised in Peru. So being first generation in this country, first generation citizen and first generation college grad means a lot to me, and is one of the things I think fighting for equity in our system, all systems, not just the juvenile justice system, but equity in education and employment and basic civil rights is really important to me. I was a teacher. I loved being a teacher. I taught in Brooklyn, New York City. I taught about 165 kids in Sunset Park in Brooklyn. I taught middle school science. It was an adventure, to say the least. And one of the things that I always tell everybody is if you are working in an urban city school district, and you may not have in your title you're a special education teacher. I had about two of my classes full had special needs in some way, shape, or form, and I had several paras in my classroom working with different students. Even though it was not, and my wife that Senator Pansing Brooks mentioned, she was a elementary, middle school special education teacher inclusion. And so we both started off in the classroom. Then we started being coaches in New York City, working in the Department of Ed. And I found my way to Omaha because she got into law school and wanted to change careers and become a special education lawyer. And we moved to Omaha. She went to Creighton, and things have been crazy ever since. I got got appointed to the Omaha Public School Board, and then 2 years later I decided to run for the state Senate, all grounded in this notion of I think we deserve different voices in representation in politics. And in my district, I represent a very lower income area with a lot of needs, probably the most diverse district in the state in terms of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. And we just continue to fight. And I've been living in Nebraska for 7 years now, and I've been in elected office for 6 of them, which is it's been a very wild ride, let's just say that. It's been great, though, every minute of it.
it's
Sure.
such a blessing to have him here in Nebraska. He's
I don't
an
think
amazing-
anybody's going to argue that.
Yeah, I'm first generation Nebraskan. Well, my daughter's a first generation Nebraskan now,
Yeah.
10-month-old.
Such a blessing.
Well, first of all, I mean, to both of you, thank you so much for what you do for these kids and families. I mean, it's really, really nice to have advocates like you two. I've been in the nonprofit world, human services world for 15 years, and it's a never-ending fight. But with advocates like you two leading that charge, it makes things look a little brighter for us. So thank you so much for everything that you do for the state of Nebraska.
Thank you all.
We definitely have topics that we want to discuss later down in what's going to happen with this upcoming session. But a question I do have is there's going to be a lot of turnover after the election. And how does that work? How do you get incoming senators up to speed with where you're at, with what the hot topics are? I'm just interested in how things like that work.
First of all, I think the staff does a really amazing job of it. So, in the executive staff, like Patrick O'Donnell and his whole group, they really do a good job of doing an orientation and trying to get people up to speed. But I think most new senators describe it as drinking from a fire hose because it is so much. And, I think especially I felt fortunate, and I felt like I could come in running pretty well because I'd followed the legislature so much, and being a lawyer, I think, helped a lot too. Tony, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I came into this with being on a school board, and so that did help. I'm not a lawyer, and I mostly did do some work in public policy, but it is drinking through a fire hose, and I think there's constantly things we should be doing to try to improve the entry point for senators, and we are losing some titans. We're losing Kate Bowles, we're losing Sarah Howard, we are losing Rick Kalowski, Jim Scheer, we're losing who else? Sue Crawford, and and amongst those, that's I think concentrated in urban or mid, in between micropolitan areas, and it's just a lot of institutional knowledge being lost, And so my main concern is how do we. It's going to be difficult to onboard anybody, but it's particularly going to be harder to glean as much information as we need from those that are departing, and somehow documenting and having somebody that's carrying over on these issues. Fortunately we're not having, Patty has been a champion for juvenile justice, and we're not losing her for another 3 years, but there's issues like Senator Bowles serves on appropriations. Those impact the work that we're talking about here in juvenile justice and children. That's going to be something we're going to need to figure out how to get all the information that she knows, and so that we can transition into somebody else that joins appropriations.
Well, I think, I look back and I think about someone like Senator Bob Christ, who was a huge advocate for juvenile justice.
Yes.
And I remember when he was getting ready to leave his post, a lot of us who are really ingrained in the system, juvenile justice system, were okay. What's going to happen with some of these priorities? But obviously, the way you guys all work together and that focus has remained, and so it's just such a nice thing to see that we're able to continue pushing forward with some of those issues. So again, thank you, Tom. What's your history with juvenile justice, and you kind of sitting over there, and I've always been a big fan and admired you, Tom. So tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I started out, I was a system-involved youth for a little bit. And back in the 60s was a different time when, the judges had a lot more, shape up or you're going to the Army, and so I did that. But after I got out of the service, I wanted to see if I could make a difference on the front end of things. And so my first job out of college was with adult corrections for 11 years, and the last 8 at the Women's Center. And then further saw that as, I'm working on the outside end, to the deeper end, and can we make a difference, sooner with kids? And so that's when I made a decision to start working with children and families, and did that for 26 years, and tremendously satisfying. But, one of the things that does bother me is we're still sometimes talking about situations and programs and such that we were 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. And, the only way we get those things changed are, someone like you folks leading, carrying that standard going forward. And I agree with you, the right to counsel thing, it just blows my mind, really, quite honestly. But so then I had the opportunity to come over here once again and work with people that I'd known for 20, 25 years, and the great work NJJA has done, and enjoyed being a part of that, and been very involved with the legislature for probably about the last 20 years, and enjoyed that.
Well, thanks for everything that you've done, obviously, too. And like so many, you're a major mentor of mine. So thank you for all of the. I'm dead serious. I look at Tom and I hope I know half the things that he knows someday. So, but one of the things that one of the things that keeps getting brought up and it should is right to counsel. Senator Brooks, let's go to Pansing Brooks. I apologize. Let's go to you first. Where do things stand right now? Where are we at, and what are we talking about this upcoming session?
Well, it is on the floor, and it's just what I need to do is get enough people to overcome a filibuster or an extended debate, and to me, it's so aggravating because I've actually fought this all really started with judges saying we don't need to have counsel for juveniles. We can handle it. We take care of our own. And my response was, okay, well, in places like Lexington, Nebraska, where 82% of the kids are in the public schools are Hispanic, which are your own? And it is probably one of the most. I can barely reason. 53 years ago, I believe this year, Justice Fortas famously proclaimed in Ray Galt, the condition of being a boy does not justify a kangaroo court. So it is constitutional law 101 that children also receive lawyers just like any adult who is going who is at risk of being incarcerated for even a day has a right to counsel. And the juvenile courts, as you all should know, are different because the judges have the entire panoply of remedies available to them. So we have told stories about a kid actually even getting removed from the home for a DUI or a minor in possession, and people are like, well, that's just not going to happen. But what has happened is that a kid will get charged with a driving while intoxicated or minor in possession, and then they come into court and they say, yeah, I guess I did it, but then the sentencing is later, and they go off and they skip school for a week and they run away from home, and then by the time they are brought back into court, the judge says, well, you're obviously out of control, we're going to take you out of home. And this is all without a lawyer. So to me, this is just atrocious what we're doing to our children. Every time children come through the Capitol, I try to ask them, do you know what an attorney is? Do you know what a right is? Do you know what counsel is? Do you know? They have no idea what I'm talking about. They've heard of attorneys sort of on TV, but they don't get that they have rights or any kind of ability to protect themselves, or that there are other people that they can ask for help from. So
it would seem to me that the Sixth Amendment's pretty clear, with that and procedural due process in the Constitution and assistance of counsel clause. I know the initial pushback was by some of the rural senators was money.
Exactly.
You've established that fund that
Yes.
they can draw out of if necessary.
We have a $1 fee, which Senator Chambers is never in favor of a fee, but he even agreed to this increase.
And the youth and family can say, we don't desire counsel.
Absolutely.
They can turn that down.
They can.
So it seems to me like you've got the bases covered here. I don't know where.
Yeah, you really do, or we do. But again, they don't. They think that they're going to somehow get charged, and the problem is that they say that it should be between the parents and the kid. And of course, the parents are aggravated with the kid at this point anyway, so they aren't the best representation always for the child. And so it really turns into a total mess. And literally, I've had people say, well, the county attorney and the judge can handle it. And I said, well, that's not a justice system. We don't have just the prosecutors and the judges who are deciding the fate of the child. We always have another portion to that whole justice system. And if you cannot afford it, then maybe we need to be closing down courthouses if justice cannot be exacted.
So you've got 6 signed on that signed on with the bill.
Oh, good. I forgot that part.
You've got 14 new ones coming in. Is that correct?
This year? No. New senators, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. We'll have 14.
That'll be next year.
We'll have a good bunch 2021. But for this short session, it's quick, and you're going to need to get 33. And
Yep.
the only thing I have to add to this is I'm shocked that it's something that we couldn't pass. It's something that we can't find consensus on. It frustrates me. This is not picking on anybody, but this notion of we take care of our own, and nobody's. I won't sit here and tell you that judges or county attorneys or even prosecutors don't all have the best intention of kids, but we all have inherent biases.
Absolutely.
And there's a reason why our system, at least for adults right now, is ensuring that there's adequate counsel for individuals that cannot afford it, is because we want to make sure that there is some due process and there's balance in the approach. What in the world makes it any less important to have that for a juvenile.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part where nobody is assuming that you don't take care of your own. Because if that was the case, then why would we even have prosecutors? Like, why won't you just have a judge make a determination just on whatever they believe they hear? There's a reason why we don't do that, because it is the rationale, the ambiguity of the cases. We need people defending on both sides to bring the accurate picture. So my hope is that, Patty and Senator Pansing Brooks and others will be able to get this over the finish line this year, because I've heard that rationale before, and it's a slippery slope. You can use that rationale. We take care of our own for a multitude of different things, and then, we could say we take care of our own. We don't need to then, help support nursing care providers out in rural Nebraska. They'll take care of their own. They'll count it. It doesn't work that way. We help subsidize at the state of Nebraska to make sure that there's adequate health coverage across the state. So I'm very hopeful. I am.
Okay, me too.
Okay.
I think I'll throw my name in there too. I truly am hopeful, and this is one that I will definitely be keeping an eye on. And one of my favorite things to do is to watch you two fight for what you guys believe in. So I will definitely be paying attention. So moving on just a little bit, Senator Pansing Brooks, I'm going to pick on you a lot today because you have a lot of bills that we're going to be talking about. One of the ones that I do want to talk about is room confinement, and kind of what has been coming out lately and recently in one of the local newspapers, and in regards to the Inspector General. What's the situation there? What are we looking at? What's the plan moving forward for that?
Well, and just to point out, also Senator Vargas did have a bill on room confinement for adults, right?
So starting in March of this year, you cannot place certain populations in solitary confinement. It includes juveniles, but this is really only confined to the correction system. Mm-hmm. So we do have juveniles in the correction system, but they did not expand to juveniles outside the correction system, which is so that's the reason why Senator Pansing Brooks has been working on this. And this was even before me. So,
wow.
So that's really important that this has happened. So now we know that kids within that are sentenced as adults and put into corrections cannot be placed into solitary, which is a really important bill. So I'm so grateful that he got that passed. And then what we have now is that my bill on a solitary confinement ban for juveniles is on the floor. It's been voted out of committee. It will probably be taken up rather rapidly. And it basically just, says you can't put kids in solitary except for maybe a couple of hours if they're a risk of harm to self or others. And that's what best practices across the nation states, that we aren't supposed to be putting these kids, that they get sicker in solitary. And we actually had a hearing yesterday on the YRTCs, and we had a couple of young women who were in the YRTCs and also placed in solitary. And it was interesting. One of the women said, I was in solitary so long. She said, when I went in, all I learned was to fight or run. And once I came out, I learned to fight, run, or be alone. I didn't have, when you're in solitary, you don't have any kind of adult contact, no kind of mentorship, no kind of healing programming or practices. So when we went out and investigated the YRTCs, I think it was in August, we came as a surprise visit, and there were a number of reasons people went, partly because of the damage that had been done, but I immediately asked to go see solitary because I wanted to see, before anybody raised the alarm and said, don't show solitary, or to answer what's solitary, I wanted to immediately be taken there. So we saw 3 girls, 2 of whom had no working lights. One of them was just lying on a wood pallet with no mattress. There was no working water or toilets, so anytime they had to go to the restroom, they had to get a guard to come and take them. It was very disturbing. They were disturbed. If you hear the testimony of the women yesterday, they lose track of basically any part of their lives, what's going on. They lose sort of functioning ability. And this is a disaster in our correctional system. I think we're liable as a state if we're treating our children that way, and clearly by not bringing them back into the population, helping them to reassimilate, deal with anger management issues, or deal with the trauma-informed care that they need,
Yep.
then we are not helping these children. And I am adamant that this has got to stop.
I'm glad you said you talked a little bit about TIC, trauma-informed care. It's one of the things that people everywhere need to understand what kind of trauma these kids have already gone through, and if you're utilizing solitary confinement at a rate that's not acceptable, what kind of trauma you're creating. It's just something that scares the heck out of me, and we've got to get it figured out, no doubt.
I think that's something that the last 15 years providers have been much more cognizant of, is the use of seclusion and restraint. The reduction in that has been remarkable. Does this bill take this out to private providers as well of programs?
It takes it to it doesn't. It takes it to a portion of private providers, but it isn't necessarily everybody. We had some pushback from various groups. But it's pretty much anybody providing care from the state is what it really is. So
if like a Medicaid provider where they've got specific rules on seclusion and restraint?
Yes, if they're receiving money in that regard, I think. So I'm so sorry. I need to check that out to be sure.
No, that's great.
It it's something I think that we used to think that was the only tool we had, or one of the few tools that as providers that you had for kids that were aggressive or that were destructive. And I think we've all learned that, as time goes by, I think back to when I first got into the field, we had a belief as therapists, as care providers, that anybody that came to us, we knew best and they're broken and we're going to fix them. That has changed so drastically. But sometimes that last little push forward needs to come from something like this. So I appreciate the fact that you're working hard on that.
It has been a hot topic, and we've seen a lot in the newspapers, and so we hope people are following out there, and we hope that people understand what our senators, Senator Brooks and Senator Vargas are trying to do with this work. So, Tom, where do you want to go next?
I think one of the things that to talk about was when we talk about placement of juveniles. Recently, we've had a few juveniles that have been ordered to the regional center, and that's kind of it used to happen more frequently, and then it kind of seemed like it dissipated. It's happened again. The Nebraska Supreme Court said if it's in the child's best interest, to go ahead and do that. We've got facilities all across the state. We've got providers out of state, and it was kind of a shock, I guess, when to everybody when that first happened. And I think there's been 6, and it was a shock to the people at the regional center.
Yep.
For sure. Is that something that's going to be addressed, do you think, in legislatively, or is it something that you think will remedy itself?
You want to start?
You go ahead.
Well, I wasn't at the hearing yesterday. Here's my reaction. My concern here, and Senator Lathrop actually said this, that this was actually more of a reaction to a momentary short-term need. But it's highlighted that we don't have a comprehensive system for placing juveniles to get the appropriate mental and behavioral health needs that they should get. And so putting them in an adult system is not the solution. So my concern is the rule thing is going to be seen as an extension of what is appropriate, rather than it was allowed momentarily because, of circumstances. So, and I think we've seen coming out of the YRTC conversation that there is a need and a benefit to then try to, sometimes we try to funnel a juvenile into a system because we're trying to fit around peg into a square, and that's the problem that we have. We're using what we have rather than being, I think, being a little overly idealistic, appropriately idealistic, and thinking, what do we need? What is missing in our system? And I think some sort of regional juvenile behavioral mental health facilities is what's missing. And this is all intertwined. And I know Senator Pansing Brooks will chime in here in a second. When we talk about the issues we had with juvenile detention, I think people would say, well, we have to detain a kid. And the reason why we felt like we needed to detain a kid was because we didn't have an alternative for them, or not nearly as many alternatives that were accessible. That's not a good reason. Or we need to then hold them until we can get them the appropriate services or the appropriate evaluation, when in reality, we're looking for a place to then house a kid that will meet their behavioral and mental health needs. And so I know there's a conversation beginning on what that could look like, what a tiered system looks like, whether or not YRTCs is one avenue, or where that could be reformed to meet better needs, because the juvenile system is rehabilitative. That is the whole nature of the whole system. And the minute we start viewing this system as non-rehabilitative, we're going down a place where I think is really dangerous, is going to just further exacerbate the problems that we have in our correction system.
And one of the things that really frustrates me is the lack of resources, like you said, specifically mental health resources. Right now we're sending a lot of kids outside of the state of Nebraska for different treatments, and I feel like we're doing them such an injustice of making, I don't want to say making them, but having them go that far away from their family, away from their school, away from their friends, because we don't have the opportunities to serve them here in the state of Nebraska. I know it's frustrating to all of us, and it's frustrating to probation. It's frustrating to everybody. We just got to figure it out. Somehow, some way, we've got to figure out how we're going to start providing these services in somewhere in the state of Nebraska.
And the scariest part about all this to me is, as Senator Vargas was talking, is that we're becoming more corrections focused rather than rehabilitative and treatment oriented. And I think that is the scariest and most disturbing part about many issues that are going on, including the YRTCs, where all of a sudden we've got this tri-tier plan where they're going to just keep moving the kids around, and the loss to those children of a consistent adult or a consistent person who can connect with them, and all of a sudden they're moved to another facility. And of course, we've already heard from the judges that the juvenile judges think this is totally improper, that we're going to be placing kids at the Lincoln Detention Center or the juvenile facility.
Lancaster County
Detention Center.
So, and then all of a sudden, and then to all of a sudden move the girls out of Geneva when that was there were some messes, but they can fix those. One of the testifiers said, you don't fix a hole in a boat by building a new boat. You just plug it up. And the issues were not that outrageous that they couldn't fix some things. And they had 56 guards there, and now they're going to use the area supposedly for welfare services and welfare and Medicaid services, but they need about 56 people for that. So it's not really a matter of the issues of the people. It's just like, well, we need this place for something else. We're going to put the kids into a fenced in, and I am really against that fence at YRTC Kearney. I have believed from the beginning Kearney wanted that place out there. They knew what they were getting, and they knew there was going to be no fence. And yeah, you have to deal with kids walking away once in a while, but there have not been giant, terrible crimes. And I just think, again, it is not supposed to be a prison. It is not supposed to be correction focused. It's supposed to be rehabilitative programming. And I'm just so discouraged, and we're going to keep fighting this. This is not over. And the state, I just heard that they got rid of the books for the girls at Geneva, and they put them into a dumpster. Even if it is ultimately settled that the girls do not go back to Geneva except for the 2 or 3 they're talking about, why in the world would they have gotten rid of the books? Why didn't they put them back out at Kearney? Or why didn't they leave them for the girls that are coming there? Or maybe switch them over to Lancaster County? Again, it's movement without thought, and it is not kind to our Nebraska children.
We, going along with the discussion, I want to say that I think that there's been some steps in the right direction legislatively, and I remember a time when there were 200 and some boys at Kearney, and legislatively, it came out, we don't put kids in the YRTCs unless there's a criteria met, and I applaud that. I remember a couple of different times, I think it was Dr. Denise Hertz did studies out at YRTC Kearney and Geneva, and noted that just as across the country, it was very much the same, that a good portion of the population had substance abuse, mental health issues, and we had no services available to treat those.
Of course.
And something that still needs to be, to be looked at. Going back to something that Rico had said, earlier about, as a youngster moves through the treatment process, it's a step backwards when you're receiving treatment and you've bought into the relationship with this person at this particular point in your treatment history, and now we're going to move you over here, and you have to start that all over with somebody else, and so. I agree with your concerns that we're going to be, it's going to be a bus moving.
It is.
Moving kids around. I'm just kind of interested. You talk about the hearing yesterday, and I'm glad to see that the joint hearing.
Joint hearing with Judiciary and Health and Human Services. Just for those that don't know.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And that was specifically about the YRTCs.
Yes.
Resultant feelings coming out of that hearing?
I think there's a lot of work to be done, is what I think. And, I think the people in Geneva really want that facility going. They had all sorts of programming where they would come in and work with the kids. They do cooking classes and knitting classes and do all sorts of things. They enjoyed them in the community. They actually went swimming with them and had, because there's an indoor swimming pool at Geneva. And so they really had a great connection. I think that was really healthy for the girls as well. So they're up in arms about this a little bit. And, this isn't a partisan issue. This is an issue about an appropriate use of very fine facilities that, yes, did get some busted up a little bit, but things can be fixed. And I just, it seems like we're using this as an excuse. The girls got up in arms about something, and so we're using it as an excuse and putting everybody down. And then we have problems with equal access to things between the boys and the girls, because they'll only move them each at different times. And so they're being educated at different times. So are the same teachers there for 12 or 15 hours a day? Because you've got to get both sets of kids educated. So how's that all going to work? That doesn't work. So it is really a big problem, and we've got to really address it. And I know Senator Vargas is really concerned about it as well.
Yeah, no, I think we'll see something that comes out. And my hope is it's not just one thing. There'll be there's a lot of different issues in the system. There's obviously educational rights, making sure that they're getting the educational support and access that they deserve. There's the support mechanisms to the system. There is questions about intake and evaluation. There's questions about efficiencies. There's questions about the traveling back and forth. I still have ongoing questions myself about the right and wrong on using a detention facility and then changing the infrastructure to then be a youth rehabilitation center here in Lancaster. I'm not the only one that feels that way. And then, the rights and access for, public defenders and defense attorneys and judges to have access to, the system as well and be able to engage with the juveniles. So there's a lot of different things that are issues. So my hope is that there's going to be something comprehensive, and then there will be some other, pieces of the puzzle in terms of legislation.
Did you get the feeling out of the hearing then that the way that they're structuring this all now, using YRTC, Kearney using a little bit of Geneva, using the detention center, is just a temporary kind of thing with a definitive plan to move forward?
Well, they said it was temporary, but they've signed a 5-year lease with the Lancaster County.
So temporary 5-year.
5 year ain't temporary.
5 years. Wow,
That's
that is not
temporary.
So it's just, they just, and if you're throwing away the library books, that doesn't seem too temporary either. And putting them in the dumpster. So I don't know. It's so aggravating to me, and it's clearly one branch not looking or listening to the other two, because we've got the judicial branch raising concerns, which they never do. For them to, that was so amazing to me, to have the judges get together and write a letter. They never ever do that. That was yeah. And then, of course, we're all raising the concerns and the alarms from the legislative standpoint. And it's just like, well, this is what we've decided. And, of course, everything's being legitimized in the best light possible, because you can make an argument for about anything. But most of the experts do not agree that this is best for our Nebraska kids.
I don't want some of these issues to overshadow some of the good things that are happening in our state. One of our podcast topics was JDI, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. We do have 4 sites here in the state of Nebraska. First being Omaha, second being Sarpy, Otoe County, and now Lancaster. And in those counties, we are definitely seeing fewer and fewer kids being detained and placed in secure facilities. So,
which is why the numbers at YRTC are going down too.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
So that's wonderful work that has been happening.
So I just don't want to. I don't want that good work that providers and probation and others are doing to be overshadowed, because it's such important work. A question that I do have for you too is, these are major issues that you guys are tackling. What can people on the front lines, if anything, do to help? We have people working with families and kids at Cedars Youth Services every single day, and there's so many other agencies like that. What can we do to help you fight the good fight? The good fight.
I think on my end, it's always helpful to get support for legislation. Don't get me wrong. I like to believe that when we intervene, it's because something should have been fixed a long time ago, or there have been problems and we are addressing problems that have arose, that's part of our role, right? But I also like to put a little locus of control and onus on every other entity that's playing a role. So in the juvenile justice system, as you even just mentioned with JDAI, yes, we've passed some legislation that have enabled us to then not overutilize certain things in the juvenile justice system and detention, specifically overusing detention. But this in large part is happening because individuals see it upon themselves to then drive culture change. They try to build efficiencies and communication mechanisms within each other. This is providers working with probation, probation working with the courts, local courts working with all sides in terms of both prosecutors and defenders and defense attorneys and judges and also with legislators. And then with all the social services put together. So that's all to say, if we can continue to have strong lines of communication within the system, then I think that's going to lead to how we can solve some of the smaller emerging problems. I don't think this is what happened, but part of my gut tells me, Geneva was not in this place 2.5 years ago. And it got to this place now. So my question is, what happened from then to now? And I think it's sometimes when we are in the thick of the work, we lose sight of how can we continually improve what we do, and without having to get to a place where we're changing or creating a new law or system on the back end. And that's one of my asks. That's one way that I think everybody in the system can be really helpful.
I'm going to speak to Senator Pansing Brooks here because I've heard her say before, we don't want to over-regulate. We don't want to over-legislate. But by golly, if somebody isn't doing the right thing at the right time, you're not afraid to step in and really very much appreciate that. I think that, going along with Rico, we've made so many advances in the state, but we've got some areas that are thorny, and we need to, trim those back.
Well, and we've made advances in not detaining kids, but there's still some major needs.
Absolutely.
We need additional community-based resources. We need in-home services. We've got to continue to make progress here. What we've done isn't enough. We've done a lot, but it's not enough. We got to continue working. Senator Vargas, do you know, is there any more plans for any other judicial districts or counties that are going to be taking on the JDI?
We're continuing to talk to more counties. I think we've been working on our strategic plan for JDAI coming out of the last meeting. And I think part of what we're doing is sort of a 2.0 of, yes, reducing detention is really great. How do we continue to improve communications, expectations, build culture, continue to use data effectively, and focus on the positives, to your point, because it could always feel really debilitating if we only focus on what we're not doing well. And then also continuing to think about race and inclusion in the world of detention and beyond. I'm just thankful that we have allies. Senator Pansing Brooks works with me in JDAI, so does Senator Quick, and whoever else joins us. We're going to have to bring in some new senators once in 2021 comes around too. So
Senator Quick's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, he's a great guy. Grand Island.
Yeah, it's my old stomping grounds.
Oh, okay.
Wood River. Yeah, so. Shelton. See.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we need to get some serious bills passed that Senator Pansing Brooks has on the docket. So we're gonna have to work on this.
I think that sometimes if we do seem like we're focused on the next problem, our problem is that we're term limited. So we only have 2 4-year terms. I have 3 years left, and I am compelled to do as much as I can for the juveniles while I'm in office. And so, we passed a really great bill last year on the SRO bill that I brought, and that's really life altering. We're now held up as an example in the United States for that bill, but I can't look back and just roll around in the glory of that bill. We have so many other things to do. So, but as Tony said, we just have all this. And, the other thing that I'm concerned about is that we tend to be balancing our budgets on the backs of children. And that is, to me, is probably the most disconcerting and very upsetting thing. Number one, children really don't know their rights. Number two, if they are improperly given their rights, they're least likely to sue the state for that. So, if you think about that, it's a lot easier to just tromp on the rights of children than it is to tromp on the rights of adults, because all of a sudden adults start speaking up and they gain other people with them, and advocates start rising up, and pretty soon there's a large problem. But the kids are sub rosa. They're underneath the radar a little bit, and that's why it's so important that Senator Vargas is doing the work he's doing, Senator Quick. The work for juveniles, to me, is paramount to, if we cannot treat our children with respect and kindness and equity, then we are doing nothing. We are mere shams of equity and kindness and compassion in our state.
Sure.
Nebraska is a large state. It's a diverse state economically, geographically, and as a state senator, you come in with this 1.7 million people saying, well, I need this, I want that, and how you balance that is on that very generous $24,000 a year, or whatever.
12.
12,000. Well,
Sorry.
I both together.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
24,000 in the biennium.
I just, I've always amazed, people think that a state senator, one of the sessions in session, legislature's in session, you're there, you're working, and then you go home and put your feet up.
Yeah.
And, that just simply isn't so, and you put in a lot of time, a lot of dates, for children in Nebraska, and we appreciate you guys leading the charge on this, really.
Well, we appreciate you guys supporting the charge. So.
Well, and I wanted to say that whatever NJJA can do to help with anything, please let us know. That's what we're here for, is to educate and lead and collaborate and all that good stuff. So please let us know. We are running a little short on time here. Is there anything that we didn't cover that Senator Vargas you'd like to, or Senator Pansing Brooks that you wanted to cover, or maybe most importantly, Tom, anything that you wanted to cover?
No, I think we can probably do 3 more of these.
I know.
Okay, we'll
talking
come back.
about
Yeah, that's fine.
We're
We'll
happy
come
to
back.
come
I mean, we're right across. I could see the Capitol.
Because if you look at the population in Nebraska, over a third of our population is under the age of 19. They deserve the services and the respect and like that you've alluded to as much as anybody. And as we get into legislative session and stuff, maybe we can do some quick podcasts and stuff updates, that kind of stuff.
But, in session podcast. What's
Yeah.
happening in the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
thank you.
have to ask one more question. You guys spend a heck of a lot of time at the Capitol. I need to know, what is your favorite part of the Capitol and why? A room, a statue, there's got to be something that you just really, really enjoy seeing.
The building is so amazing.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Really, it's so hard to even. How do you choose glorious rotunda versus the beautiful murals on the wall that Marxhausen did, to the upper
Intricate
the
sconces.
the Native Americans within the entire dome of the Thunderbirds. It's a glorious building, and I feel so privileged to get to be there for a short time.
Now, will you be moving offices as they do the renovation stuff?
I hope to not. I don't think I'll be moving, but I haven't moved since I got in.
I've moved now 3 times, and I know that I have to move one more time. So I don't
That
know
is
what
not-
that is, but that's how it is.
Well-
The only thing I'll say, one thing I do want
Yes,
to say
please.
is, it is, we said this a little bit earlier, Senator Pansing Brooks, we both said this, even looking at all the bills that we're talking about and most of the subject matter, it is this move sometimes to make juvenile, to then move to a more corrections-based system. And this is a rehabilitative state. I want it to continue to be that way when we're talking about juveniles. And I think the bright spots, we can then continue to use that as fodder for what we can keep doing, which is it's people, it's culture change, it's people continuing to think that we can do better, that it's never enough until less juveniles are in our system altogether. I'm just really encouraged by that. And like I said, I came into this learning a lot of this from Senator Christ and from Senator Pansing Brooks. So I'm with term limits, I'm on the newer end, but I'm already running for re-election. So I'm halfway through nearly. So I'm just really thankful to have Senator Pansing Brooks in the body.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. And we're grateful for this time.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
I don't want to speak for everybody. You
Do
know
it
what? I
again.
actually think I can speak for everybody who's involved with NJJA. Is thank you guys so much for taking the time out. It's been a great experience for me, and I'm sure for Tom and Tracy. But I think that's it. I think it's a wrap. So I think we're good to go. Thank you
Hey,
guys.
Rico,
Thank you.
thank you both. Thank you, Rico. It's fantastic to have you.
Yes.
Tracy, getting this right. Obviously, Tom, and it's just really nice to be here. I was late, so I appreciate you guys waiting for me too.
Happy 2020 to everybody.
Yeah.
Yes,
Enjoy
happy
a
holidays.
fantastic 2020.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.